the outcast, and the cowboy. The rain hammered against the metal roof of Jake Morrison's barn like angry fists. Lightning split the purple sky of Kepler 442b, illuminating the rolling hills that reminded him so much of Montana back on Earth. He'd been on this frontier world for 3 years now, raising cattle that were half Earth-bred and half adapted for the alien atmosphere. It was honest work, lonely work, but it suited him just fine. Jake pulled his worn cowboy hat lower over his eyes as he checked the cattle one last time before heading back to his small farmhouse. The storm was getting worse, and his modified longhorns were huddled together under the shelter he'd built for them. Everything looked secure. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm or his animals. A low, pained whimper coming from somewhere near the eastern fence line. Jake grabbed his plasma rifle from the barn and his emergency med kit, then headed out into the driving rain. The sound led him to a cluster of purple-leafed trees that grew wild along his property line. There, curled up against the largest trunk and soaked to the bone, was something Jake had never seen before. It looked like a cross between a leopard and a person, covered in spotted fur that was matted with rain and mud. The creature was clearly female, clearly pregnant, and clearly in bad shape. Jake approached slowly, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. The alien's eyes opened, large golden eyes filled with pain and fear. She tried to back away but was too weak. Her lips pulled back to show sharp teeth, not in aggression but in a grimace of pain. "Easy there, girl," Jake said softly, the same tone he used with spooked cattle. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien said something in a language that sounded like a mix of purring and clicking. Jake didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. She was begging. Jake set down his rifle and held up his hands. "I don't know what you're saying, but you're hurt and you're pregnant. I'm going to help you, okay?" He pulled out his emergency translator, a standard piece of tech that all frontier settlers carried. It took a few moments to calibrate to her language, but soon it was providing rough translations. "Please, don't send me away," the alien woman said through the device. "I have nowhere else to go." Jake knelt down in the mud beside her. Up close, he could see that her spotted fur was beautiful, golden with black rosettes like an earth leopard. Her face was humanoid, but with feline features, and her ears were pointed and mobile. She was wearing torn clothing that might once have been nice. "What's your name?" Jake asked. "Senna," she replied. I was of the Cathari people." "I'm Jake. Can you walk? We need to get you inside before you catch pneumonia or worse." Senna tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Jake caught her, surprised by how light she was despite being heavily pregnant. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. "It's okay," Jake said. "I'm going to carry you to the house. Don't be afraid." He lifted her carefully, one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back. Senna's claws extended reflexively. But she kept them retracted as he carried her through the storm to his farmhouse. Inside, Jake's home was simple but clean. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. He carried Senna to his guest room and laid her on the bed, then went to fetch dry clothes and blankets. "Here," he said, offering her one of his flannel shirts and some sweatpants. "These will be too big, but they're dry and warm." Senna took the clothes but looked confused. "Why are you helping me? Your species doesn't know mine. We could be enemies." Jake shrugged. "Could be, but you're pregnant and hurt and alone in a storm. That's enough for me." While Senna changed into the dry clothes, Jake made hot soup and coffee. When he returned to the room, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, swimming in his oversized clothes but looking much better than she had in the rain. "Thank you," she said simply. Jake handed her a bowl of soup and noticed her hands were shaking. "When's the last time you ate?" 3 days, Senna admitted. "Maybe 4. Jesus." Jake went back to the kitchen and made her another bowl, plus some sandwiches. Eat slow. Don't want to make yourself sick. As Senna ate, Jake studied her. She had the grace of a cat even while exhausted, and her golden eyes were intelligent and sad. The translator device sat between them on the nightstand, facilitating their conversation. "So, what happened to you?" Jake asked gently. "How'd you end up alone on my land?" Senna's ears flattened against her head. "It's a long story." "I've got time." "Storm's not letting up anytime soon." Senna was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak. "The Cathari are what you might call traditionalists. We have very strict rules about mating and families. I fell in love with someone my clan didn't approve of." "What was wrong with him?" "Her," Senna corrected. "Her name was Yira. She was from a lower caste, and same-gender unions are forbidden among my people. But we loved each other anyway. We found a way to create life together, using genetic technology." Jake nodded. He'd heard of such things. Advanced alien races often had capabilities that seemed like magic to humans. "When the clan leaders discovered I was pregnant," Senna continued, "they demanded to know who the father was. When I refused to lie about Yira, they cast me out, permanently. In Cathari culture, an outcast is forbidden from receiving help from any member of the species." "What about Yira?" Senna's eyes filled with tears. "They killed her, said she had corrupted me with unnatural desires and dishonored the clan." Jake felt anger burn in his chest. Those bastards. "I've been wandering for months," Senna said. "Every world I've tried, every species I've encountered, they turn me away when they learn I'm Cathari. My people have a reputation for being difficult to deal with. Most species won't risk angering them by helping an outcast." "Well, they haven't met humans yet," Jake said firmly. "We've got a saying where I come from. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I'm not about to let you and your baby suffer because your people are bigots." Senna stared at him in amazement. "You would risk making enemies of the Cathari for someone you just met?" "Darling, my people have been fighting bullies since we figured out how to make pointy sticks. We're not about to stop now." Over the next few days, as the storm passed and Senna recovered her strength, Jake learned more about her and her people. The Cathari were a proud, militaristic race with a rigid caste system and strict social rules. They were also advanced traders and had significant influence in this sector of the galaxy. Most species went out of their way to avoid offending them. Senna, despite her circumstances, was clearly intelligent and educated. She'd been a scientist before her exile, specializing in agricultural genetics. She was fascinated by Jake's ranch and asked endless questions about his hybrid cattle and the way he'd adapted earth farming techniques to alien soil. "Your people are remarkable," she said one evening as they sat on Jake's porch watching the sunset. Her pregnancy was clearly advancing. She was about 6 months along by human standards, though Cathari pregnancies were shorter. "You take the best of what you have and adapt it to new circumstances instead of trying to force the new place to be exactly like the old one." "That's survival," Jake said. "You adapt or you die. Though I gotta say, your people seem to have done pretty well for themselves without adapting much." "Have we?" Senna's tail swished thoughtfully. "We're powerful, yes, but we're also isolated. We trust no one, work with no one except when forced to. We've made enemies of half the galaxy and the other half fears us too much to be real friends." Jake sipped his coffee. "Sounds like a lonely way to live." "It is. I never realized how lonely until I was cast out." She looked at him. "You're the first person in months to treat me like a person instead of a problem to be solved or avoided." That night, Jake was awakened by sounds from the guest room. He grabbed his robe and knocked softly on the door. "Senna, you okay in there?" "Jake," came her voice, tight with pain. I think the baby is coming." Jake's blood went cold. He'd helped deliver cattle, but this was entirely different. Okay, don't panic. Do you know how long Cathari labor takes? Normally, 4 to 6 hours, Senna gasped. But something's wrong. The pain it's too much. Too fast. Jake burst into the room to find Senna curled on her side, her face contorted with pain. Her claws had extended, and she'd torn furrows in the blankets. We need to get you to a doctor, Jake said. No. Senna grabbed his arm with desperate strength. No doctors. If they scan me and find out I'm Cathari, they'll turn me away. And if they contact my people, then we'll tell them you're something else. We'll figure it out. Jake was already reaching for his communicator to call for emergency transport. Wait. Senna's grip on his arm tightened. There's something else. Something I haven't told you. Jake paused. What? The baby. It's not just Cathari. The genetic combination Yira and I used, it incorporated some human DNA. Jake stared at her. Human? How? Yira worked in genetic research. She had access to samples from many species. She said human genetics were remarkably adaptable. She thought it might help our child be stronger, more able to survive in a galaxy that would see it as an abomination. So the baby is part human. About 30%, enough that it might not survive a normal Cathari birth. The genetic combination is unstable. Tears ran down Senna's face. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was afraid you'd be angry about us using your species' genetic material without permission. Jake sat down on the bed and took her hand gently. Honey, I'm not angry, but this means we definitely need medical help. Professional help. They'll take the baby away if they know what it is, Senna whispered. A hybrid with illegal genetic modifications born to an outcast. They'll study it like a lab specimen. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. Then he made a decision that would change everything. No, they won't, he said firmly. Because as of right now, that baby is mine. Senna stared at him in shock. What? Legally speaking, you're my wife. Been living on my property for weeks. We'll say we had a quick ceremony by human custom. The baby is mine. Half human, just like it actually is. Human Cathari hybrid, legitimate child of human citizen Jake Morrison and his wife Senna Morrison. Jake, you don't understand what you're offering to do, Senna gasped through another contraction. If my people find out you've claimed their outcast as family, then they'll have to go through me to get to you, Jake said. And I'm betting they've never dealt with a stubborn human cowboy before. Despite her pain, Senna managed a weak smile. You're insane. Probably. But it's the right kind of insane. Jake squeezed her hand. Now let's go have a baby. The trip to the medical center in town was harrowing. Jake drove his hover truck as fast as he dared while Senna fought through increasingly painful contractions in the passenger seat. By the time they arrived, she was barely conscious. The medical staff at the Frontier Clinic had dealt with unusual situations before, but a human Cathari hybrid birth was definitely a first. Dr. Sarah Chen, the chief physician, took one look at the readings and shook her head. This is beyond our capabilities, she told Jake in the hallway, while Senna was being prepped for surgery. The baby's physiology is too complex. We need to transfer her to the main medical facility on Proxima Station. How long would that take? Jake asked. 6 hours minimum. She doesn't have 6 hours. Jake felt his heart sink. So what are our options? I can try to stabilize her and the baby, but I'm going to need help. There's a Vorthak medical ship in orbit. They're the best trauma surgeons in the sector, and they owe me a favor. Problem is, they'll want to know why a human and a Cathari are having a baby together. It's going to raise questions. Let me worry about the questions, Jake said. Just save my family. Dr. Chen studied his face and saw the determination there. All right, I'll make the call. 2 hours later, Jake sat in the waiting room while alien surgeons worked to save Senna and their child. He'd never felt so helpless in his life. Here he was, a simple rancher from Montana, betting everything on his ability to protect two beings he'd known for less than a week. Dr. Chen emerged from surgery looking exhausted but relieved. They're both stable. The baby is in an artificial womb for now. Her development needs to be carefully monitored for the next few weeks. But she's alive and healthy. You have a daughter, Jake. Congratulations. Jake felt tears run down his face. A daughter. He was a father. Can I see them? Senna's still unconscious, but she should wake up in a few hours. The baby... Dr. Chen hesitated. Jake, you should know. She's beautiful, but she's obviously not entirely human. Word is going to get out about what happened here. Let it, Jake said. I'm not hiding from anybody. In the recovery room, Jake sat beside Senna's bed and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. In the medical bay next door, their daughter floated in a transparent artificial womb, a tiny, perfect fusion of human and Cathari features. Jake made a silent promise to both of them. Whatever came next, whatever enemies they might face, he would protect his new family. He was a cowboy, and cowboys didn't back down from a fight. Outside the medical center, news was already spreading. A human had claimed a Cathari outcast as his wife. A hybrid child had been born. And somewhere in the depths of space, the proud and powerful Cathari collective was learning that a simple human rancher had just challenged everything they stood for. The storm was over, but Jake had a feeling a much bigger one was just beginning. The Pride of Lions. 3 weeks after their daughter's birth, Jake Morrison was learning that being an interstellar incident was more complicated than he'd expected. Little Luna, as they'd named her, was thriving in the medical center's care, growing stronger each day. She was a beautiful blend of both her parents' species, with Senna's golden eyes and spotted markings, but more human-like facial features, and Jake's stubborn streak already showing in how she gripped his finger. Senna had recovered from the difficult birth and was staying at the medical center to be close to Luna. The artificial womb would keep their daughter safe for another month while her hybrid physiology stabilized. But their peaceful time was running out. Jake, Dr. Chen said as she approached him in the medical center's cafeteria. We have a problem. A big one. Jake looked up from his coffee. He'd been living on caffeine and worry for days. What now? There's a Cathari diplomatic vessel requesting permission to dock at Proxima Station. They're claiming you kidnapped one of their people and are demanding her return. Like hell. Jake's voice was calm, but his knuckles were white around his coffee cup. Senna's not their people anymore. They made that clear when they exiled her. That's not how they're spinning it. They're saying she's a criminal who fled justice and that you're harboring a fugitive. They're also saying the hybrid child is an abomination that needs to be destroyed for the good of both species. Jake felt rage boil in his chest. Over my dead body. That might be exactly what they have in mind. Dr. Chen sat down across from him. Jake, you don't understand what you're dealing with. The Cathari Collective has the military power to glass this entire planet if they decide you're a threat to their social order. Then why haven't they? Jake asked. If they're so powerful, why are they bothering with diplomacy? Dr. Chen looked puzzled. That's actually a good question. Usually they just take what they want. Before Jake could respond, his communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender ID made his blood run cold. Cathari Collective Diplomatic Corps. The message was simple. Mr. Morrison, we request a meeting to discuss the return of our property and the disposal of the genetic anomaly. Respond within 24 hours or face the consequences. Jake showed the message to Dr. Chen, whose face went pale. They're calling Luna a genetic anomaly and Senna property. Yeah, I noticed that too. Jake's jaw was set in a hard line. Send them a message back. Tell them Jake Morrison would be happy to meet with them. But they come to me, not the other way around. Jake, that's what's going to happen. Jake stood up. I need to make some calls. The first call Jake made was to his lawyer back on Earth, who nearly choked when Jake explained the situation. The second was to the Human Colonial Administration, who were very interested to learn that one of their citizens had just claimed an alien wife and hybrid child. The third call was the most important. Hello, Captain Rodriguez. It's Jake Morrison. Yeah, the rancher. Listen, I need to cash in that favor you owe me. Captain Maria Rodriguez commanded a small but well-armed human patrol vessel that made regular stops at Kepler 442b. Jake had saved her nephew's life during a mining accident 2 years earlier, and she'd promised to repay the debt. Now Jake was calling it in. Jake, what kind of trouble are you in? Rodriguez asked when he explained what he needed. The kind where powerful aliens want to kill my wife and daughter because they don't fit into neat little boxes, Jake said. Your wife is an alien cat person and your daughter is a hybrid? That's about the size of it. There was a long pause. When do you need me? Yesterday would be good. Tomorrow will have to do. I'll be there in 18 hours with a full escort. Jake? Yeah? For the record, this is either the stupidest or the bravest thing I've ever heard of. Probably both, Jake admitted. The next morning, Jake stood on the landing platform of Proxima Station as the Cathari diplomatic vessel descended from orbit. It was an elegant ship, all flowing curves and gleaming metal that looked more like a work of art than a spacecraft. But Jake could see the weapon ports hidden in its graceful lines. Beside him stood Senna, holding Luna in her arms. Their daughter was out of the artificial womb now, healthy and growing fast. She looked remarkably human, except for her golden eyes, pointed ears, and the faint spotted pattern that was just beginning to show on her skin. Are you sure about this? Senna asked quietly. It's not too late to run. Running won't solve anything, Jake replied. Besides, I've got backup. As if summoned by his words, 3 human patrol ships dropped out of hyperspace and took position above the station. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over Jake's communicator. We're in position, cowboy. Say the word and we'll turn these cats into space debris. Hopefully it won't come to that, Jake replied. The Cathari ship landed with barely a sound. A ramp extended and 6 figures emerged. 5 were clearly soldiers, tall, powerful Cathari in battle armor that gleamed like liquid metal. The 6th was different. Older, wearing robes instead of armor, with silver fur and scars that spoke of long service. This one's bearing screamed authority. That's War Leader Thax, Senna whispered. He's the one who ordered Yira's execution. Jake's hand moved instinctively to the plasma pistol on his hip. The one who killed your partner? Jake, don't. He's too dangerous. We'll see about that. The Cathari delegation approached with the fluid grace of born predators. War Leader Thax studied Jake with amber eyes that missed nothing, then turned his attention to Senna and Luna. Outcast, Thax said, his voice a low rumble that the universal translator rendered in perfect English. You have caused considerable trouble. I've caused trouble? Senna's voice was steady despite her fear. I fell in love with someone you disapproved of. That's my only crime. Your crime was genetic contamination and species corruption. The abomination you carry proves your guilt. Thax's eyes fixed on Luna, and there was nothing but disgust in his expression. Her name is Luna, Jake said quietly. And she's my daughter. Thax finally looked directly at Jake. Human, you have been deceived by this creature. She has used your genetic material without permission to create a biological weapon. Return her to us, and we will ensure you face no consequences for your ignorance. Biological weapon? Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's a baby. 3 weeks old. She is an unstable hybrid with the potential to spread genetic chaos across multiple species. Such abominations cannot be permitted to exist. Says who? The question clearly surprised Thakex. Says the natural order. Says the purity of species that has maintained galactic stability for millennia. Well, says me that you're full of crap. Jake stepped forward, and he was pleased to see one of the Cathari soldiers tense. See, where I come from, we've got a different way of looking at things. We judge people by their actions, not their genetics. You are a primitive species with no understanding of the complexities involved, Thax snarled. Maybe so, but I understand bullying just fine. Jake's voice was getting louder. You killed an innocent woman because she loved someone you didn't approve of. You cast out another woman for the crime of being pregnant. And now you want to murder a baby because she doesn't fit your narrow definition of what's acceptable. The collective's decisions are not subject to human judgment. No, but they're sure as hell subject to human consequences. Jake smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. See, here's the thing about humans, war leader. We're pack animals. And when someone threatens our pack, we don't fold. We fight. As if summoned by his words, the space around Proxima Station suddenly filled with ships. Not just Rodriguez's patrol vessels, but civilian craft, cargo haulers, mining ships, and even a few alien vessels. All broadcasting the same message. We stand with Jake Morrison. Thax looked up at the growing fleet with something that might have been concern. What is this? This, Jake said proudly, is what happens when you mess with a human's family. Word got out about what you're trying to do here. Turns out most folks don't like bullies much more than we do. Captain Rodriguez's voice boomed across the landing platform from the external speakers of her ship. War Leader Thakex, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Colonial Navy. You are outnumbered 50-1 and outgunned about 1,000-1. I suggest you reconsider your position. You would risk interstellar war over one exile and her mongrel offspring? Thax demanded. We'd risk it over the principle, Jake replied. See, that's another thing about humans. We've got this crazy idea that everyone deserves a chance at happiness, regardless of what species they are or who they love. For a long moment, the landing platform was silent except for the hum of ship engines overhead. Then Thax spoke again, his voice deadly quiet. You do not understand what you have done, human. The collective will not forget this insult. We will not forgive this interference in our affairs. Good, Jake said, because we won't forget what you did to Yira, and we won't forgive you trying to murder my family. Thax turned to his soldiers. We leave, now. Wait, Senna called out. The war leader paused, looking back at her with contempt. I am no longer Cathari, she said clearly. I renounce my citizenship in the collective and formally request asylum with the Human Colonial Administration. I choose to become human. You cannot simply become another species, Thax spat. Can't she? Jake asked. Because it seems to me that being human is less about genetics and more about how you treat other people. And she's already more human than a lot of humans I've met. Dr. Chen stepped forward from the crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation. As the ranking medical officer on Proxima Station, I can confirm that genetic species classification is far more fluid than most people believe. With proper documentation and legal procedures, such a change of species designation is entirely possible. The collective will never recognize such a change, Thax warned. The collective doesn't have to, Jake replied. 57 other species already do, including mine. It was true. In the 3 weeks since Luna's birth, Jake's story had spread across the known galaxy. the tale of a human cowboy who stood up to the mighty Cathari collective to protect an alien refugee had captured imaginations everywhere. Dozens of species had sent messages of support, and several had offered formal recognition of Senna's change of citizenship if she chose to pursue it. Thacax looked around at the assembled crowd, at the ships overhead, at the determination in Jake's eyes. For the first time, he seemed to realize that this was not a battle he could win through force. "This is not over," he said finally. "No," Jake agreed, "it's not. But here's the thing, every time you come at my family, we're going to be ready, and we're not going to be alone." As the Cathari delegation returned to their ship, Senna looked up at Jake with tears in her eyes. "You know what this means, don't you? You've made an enemy of one of the most powerful species in the galaxy." "Honey," Jake said, bouncing Luna gently in his arms, "I've been making enemies since I was old enough to throw a punch. The difference is, this time I'm fighting for something that really matters." The Cathari ship lifted off and disappeared into hyperspace, but Jake knew Thax was right. This wasn't over. The war leader would be back, probably with a much larger force. But Jake wasn't worried. He had something the Cathari didn't understand, a family worth fighting for and a galaxy full of people who believed that love mattered more than genetic purity. As the crowd dispersed and the ships above began to return to their various destinations, Jake stood with Senna and Luna on the platform and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, powerful enemies were planning their next move, but somewhere else, allies were rallying to their cause. "What happens now?" Senna asked. Jake smiled and kissed the top of Luna's head. "Now we go home and live our lives, and when trouble comes, and it will come, we face it together." "Even if it means war?" "Especially if it means war," Jake said. "Because some things are worth fighting for, and family is at the top of that list." Above them, the stars seemed to twinkle a little brighter, as if the universe itself was smiling at the stubborn human cowboy who'd decided that love was stronger than tradition and that family was more important than politics. The Cathari had made a mistake when they cast out Senna. They'd made a bigger mistake when they threatened Luna. But their biggest mistake of all was underestimating the lengths a human would go to protect the people he loved. Soon, they would learn just how costly that mistake could be. The new pack. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at Proxima Station, and life on Kepler 442b had settled into a rhythm that Jake Morrison found surprisingly comfortable. Luna was growing fast, already showing signs of the intelligence and curiosity that marked both her parents. She could crawl at superhuman speed, her hybrid strength allowing her to pull herself up furniture that should have been too tall for a baby her age. Her golden eyes missed nothing, and she seemed to understand both English and Cathari with equal ease. Senna had officially become a human citizen 3 months earlier, in a ceremony that had been broadcast across the galaxy. The human colonial administration had been thrilled to have such a visible example of their open immigration policies, and dozens of other species had sent congratulations. More importantly to Jake, Senna was happy. She'd found work as an agricultural consultant, helping other frontier worlds adapt their farming techniques for alien crops. Her combination of Cathari scientific training and human adaptability made her incredibly valuable. But Jake knew the peace couldn't last forever. He was working in his barn, checking on a pregnant heifer that was due any day, when his communicator chimed with an emergency signal. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, tense with worry. "Jake, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors are picking up a massive Cathari fleet heading your way. Looks like about 200 ships." Jake felt his blood go cold. "How long do we have?" 12 hours, maybe less. Jake, this isn't just a diplomatic mission. This is an invasion force." Jake closed his eyes and thought fast. 200 ships meant thousands of Cathari soldiers, probably led by war leader Thax himself. They wouldn't be interested in negotiations this time. "Maria, I need you to do something for me," Jake said. "Get word to every human fleet in the sector. Tell them Jake Morrison is calling in every favor he's ever been owed. Jake, even if we could get 100 ships together, we'd still be outnumbered 2-1. Then we better be creative." Jake ran back to the house where he found Senna playing with Luna on the living room floor. Both of them looked up as he burst through the door, and Senna immediately knew something was wrong. "They're coming back, aren't they?" she said quietly. 200 ships. We've got maybe 12 hours. Senna went pale. "Jake, we have to run. Take Luna and go somewhere they can't find you." "No." Jake's voice was firm. "I'm not running and I'm not leaving you behind." "But..." "No buts. We're a family. We stick together." Jake knelt down and picked up Luna, who babbled happily and grabbed at his hat. "Besides, I've got an idea." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Jake sent messages across the galaxy, not just to human forces but to every species that had expressed support for their cause. He contacted the media networks that had been following their story, the refugee organizations that had offered help, and even some of the merchant guilds that had economic reasons to oppose Cathari aggression. Most importantly, he contacted Dr. Chen. "Jake, what you're asking is impossible," she said when he explained his plan. "I can't modify your daughter's genetics on the fly. Even if I could, the risks of doing nothing are worse," Jake replied. "They're coming to kill her, Sarah, all of her. If we don't try something dramatic, my daughter dies either way." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "It would take time. And I'd need Senna's consent. What we're talking about is essentially making Luna a completely new species." "How long?" 6 hours minimum, 8 to be safe." "Do it." While Dr. Chen prepared her equipment, Jake worked on the other part of his plan. He contacted every news network in the galaxy and arranged for live coverage of the coming battle. If the Cathari wanted to murder a baby and her family, they were going to do it in front of the entire galaxy. The response was overwhelming. Ships began arriving within hours, not just human vessels, but alien craft from dozens of species. The Vorthax sent a medical ship. The crystalline Zephyrians sent a small but powerful squadron. Even the reclusive Ethereals sent a single ship, which in their culture was a massive show of support. "Jake!" Captain Rodriguez called from the bridge of her flagship. "We've got nearly 300 ships here now, but I have to warn you, most of these are civilian vessels or lightly armed patrol boats. Against Cathari military ships..." "I know," Jake replied, "but this isn't about winning a straight fight. This is about making a statement." As the fleet gathered in orbit above Kepler 442b, Jake and his family made their way to Dr. Chen's laboratory. Luna was unusually quiet, as if she sensed the tension around her. Senna held her close, whispering to her in Cathari. "What are you telling her?" Jake asked. "That she's loved, that she's special, that her parents will never let anyone hurt her." Senna's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Jake, what if this doesn't work?" "Then we go down fighting," Jake said simply. "But it's going to work." Dr. Chen had set up her equipment in the main laboratory. The genetic modification chamber looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a cylindrical tank filled with glowing blue fluid and surrounded by complex machinery. "The process is simple in theory," Dr. Chen explained. "Luna's existing hybrid genetics are unstable because they're trying to express both human and Cathari traits simultaneously. What I'm going to do is stabilize them by adding genetic markers from the other species that have pledged support to your cause." "You're going to make her part alien?" Jake asked. "I'm going to make her something new. Not human, not Cathari, not any single species. She'll be something that's never existed before, a true galactic citizen, carrying genetic heritage from dozens of worlds." Senna looked worried. "What are the risks?" "Honestly, I don't know. This has never been attempted before. But Luna's hybrid nature means she's already genetically flexible. Her body should be able to handle the additional modifications. Jake looked down at his daughter, who was staring up at him with those impossibly wise golden eyes. "What do you think, little girl? You want to be something new?" Luna gurgled and reached for his nose, making Jake smile despite the circumstances. "Let's do it," he said. The genetic modification process took 4 hours. Jake and Senna sat in the waiting area, watching through a transparent wall as their daughter floated in the modification chamber. Machines hummed and glowed around her, carefully rewriting her DNA to include traits from every species that had sent ships to defend her. "Readings are stable," Dr. Chen reported. "The integration is proceeding better than I hoped. Her hybrid genetics are actually accelerating the process." When Luna emerged from the chamber, she looked essentially the same, but somehow more. Her spotted fur pattern was more pronounced now, with colors that seemed to shift subtly in the light. Her golden eyes had flecks of other colors, the silver of Zephyrian crystal sight, the deep purple of ethereal consciousness, the warm brown of human determination. "How do you feel, baby girl?" Jake asked softly. Luna looked at him and spoke her first word, "Dada." But she didn't just say it in English. She said it simultaneously in Kithari, Vorthak, Zephyrian, and 6 other languages. Her modified vocal cords somehow capable of producing multiple sounds at once. "Well," Dr. Chen said with wonder in her voice, "I'd say the modification was successful." That was when the alarm started going off. The Kithari fleet had arrived. Jake carried Luna to the observation deck, where they could see the massive Kithari armada spreading across the sky. 200 warships, each one capable of reducing the planet to ashes. At their head was a massive dreadnought that could only belong to war leader Thax. "Attention, Jake Morrison," Thax's voice boomed across all communication channels. "You have 30 minutes to surrender the abomination and the exile, or we will destroy every ship in orbit and glass the planet below." Jake looked around at the diverse fleet that had come to defend his family. Humans, Vorthak, Zephyrians, Ethereals, and dozens of other species, all united in the belief that love was stronger than prejudice. He opened a communication channel to the entire galaxy. "War Leader Thax, this is Jake Morrison. I've got something to show you." The image appeared on screens across known space. Jake standing on the observation deck, holding Luna in his arms, with Senna beside him. But now everyone could see what Luna had become. "This is my daughter," Jake said clearly. "Her name is Luna Morrison. She's not just human and Kithari anymore. She's part Vorthak, part Zephyrian, part ethereal, and part of every species that sent ships here today to defend her right to exist." He held Luna up so the cameras could see her clearly. As if she understood what was happening, Luna began to glow, a soft, multicolored light that was visible to every species according to their own perception. To humans, she looked like starlight. To Kithari, she appeared as the blessing of their ancient moon goddess. To the ethereals, she seemed to pulse with the rhythm of consciousness itself. "She's not an abomination," Jake continued. "She's the future. She's what happens when species choose cooperation over conflict, love over hate. She's proof that we're all stronger together than we are apart." Across the galaxy, beings of 100 species watched in wonder as Luna spoke again. Not words this time, but something deeper. A sound that somehow conveyed love, hope, and infinite possibility. It was translated differently by every universal translator, but the meaning was the same. "I am all of us, and all of us are me." War Leader Thax's response came through gritted teeth. "Genetic contamination on this scale is a threat to every pure species in the galaxy. That creature must be destroyed." "Over our dead bodies," came a new voice. It was Ambassador Keth of the Zephyrian Republic. "The Zephyrian Republic formally adopts Luna Morrison as a citizen and extends full diplomatic protection." The Vorthak Collective seconds that motion, came another voice. The Ethereal Assembly agrees. One by one, every species with ships in orbit formally adopted Luna as a citizen, extending their protection to her and her family. By the time they were finished, Luna Morrison held citizenship in 47 different stellar nations. You see, War Leader, Jake said with a smile in his voice, that's the thing about family. It's not about genetics, it's about choice. And 47 species have just chosen to make my daughter their family too. Thax was silent for a long moment. Then, we have the firepower to destroy you all. Yes, you do, Jake agreed. But the question is, what happens after? Because right now the entire galaxy is watching. Every news network, every government, every being with access to communication is seeing this. If you murder a baby and 47 species worth of ships just for existing, what do you think happens to the Cathari Collective after that? We are strong enough to stand alone. Are you? Jake's voice was gentle but pointed. Because I've been doing some research these past few months. Your economy depends on trade with the species you're threatening to make war against. Your technology comes from cooperation with scientists you're calling genetically impure. Your own people are starting to ask questions about why so many other species seem to be happy while you're isolated and angry all the time. It was true. In the months since Jake's story had spread across the galaxy, there had been growing unrest within the Cathari Collective. Young Cathari were beginning to question their elders' rigid beliefs about genetic purity and species separation. Some had even publicly supported Senna's right to choose her own path. You have one chance here, Jake continued. You can choose to be part of something bigger than yourselves. You can choose to accept that the galaxy is changing, that the old ways of thinking about species and genetics are dying. Or you can stand alone, getting smaller and angrier and more isolated until you're nothing but a historical footnote about a species that chose hate over hope. The communication channels fell silent. For long minutes, two fleets faced each other across the void while the galaxy held its breath. Finally, Thax spoke again. What are your terms? No terms, Jake replied. Just choices. Choose to accept that my daughter has the right to exist. Choose to accept that love matters more than bloodlines. Choose to be part of a galaxy where different species work together instead of fighting each other. And if we refuse? Jake looked down at Luna, who was glowing softly in his arms and babbling in a dozen languages at once. Then you refuse, and you live with the consequences of that choice. But either way, you don't touch my family. Another long silence. Then, the Cathari fleet is withdrawing. This matter is concluded. As the massive dreadnought and its escorts turned away from Kepler 442b, Jake felt Senna's hand slip into his. Around them, the diverse fleet that had come to defend their family began to celebrate. Is it really over? Senna asked quietly. The immediate threat? Yeah. But Thax was right about one thing. Luna really is going to change everything. Over the following months, Luna's story spread to every corner of the galaxy. She became a symbol of hope and unity, proof that the barriers between species were artificial constructs that could be overcome with love and determination. Refugees from dozens of worlds came to Kepler 442b, knowing they would find acceptance there. Scientists came to study Luna's unique genetics and ended up staying to work on projects that benefited all species. The planet that had once been just another frontier world became known as New Hope, a place where anyone could find a home regardless of their species, their past, or their genetic makeup. Jake's ranch grew into a settlement, then a town, then a city built around the principle that family was about choice, not blood. Luna grew up to be exactly what Jake had predicted, something new. She could communicate with any species in the galaxy, understand their perspectives and needs in ways that no single species being ever could. She became the galaxy's first truly universal diplomat, helping to negotiate peace treaties and trade agreements between species that had been enemies for centuries. But to Jake, she was always just his little girl. Years later, when Luna was old enough to understand her own story, she asked Jake why he had taken such a huge risk to save her and Senna. "Because," Jake said, adjusting his old cowboy hat and watching the sunset over a world that was now home to beings from across the galaxy, "family is worth fighting for. And you two were my family the moment I decided you were?" Luna smiled, a smile that somehow managed to be human and Kithari and 45 other things all at once, and hugged her father tight. "I love you too, Dada," she said in the universal language of love that needed no translation. In the end, that was what mattered. Not genetics, not species purity, not ancient traditions or political power. Just love, and the stubborn determination of one human cowboy who believed that everyone deserved a chance at happiness. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from Jake Morrison and his family, that the bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born with, and that sometimes the most radical act in the universe is simply refusing to let fear win over love. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything.